let's take a look at how a patch is put together and go through the process of setting up some layers, splits, and zones. But first, a little information about some quick access buttons. You can get information about all the tones in a patch by pressing the Tone Display button. This is one of the quick access buttons. Like the other three quick access buttons, MIDI Out, Effect Control, and Parts, it gives you instant access to many important parameters. The Tone Display button gives you patch information. The MIDI Out, Effect Control, and Part buttons give you information on different aspects of the currently selected performance. You'll notice that each button has a page icon to the right of its name. You can move through the different pages associated with each button just by pressing it a second or third time. Creating a layered patch is easy. In fact, by default, any patch you create can automatically contain 4 tones that are spread out across the entire range of the keyboard. So you've got instant layers just by enabling and disabling different tones with the Tone Zone Select buttons.
Starting with a new patch, let's make a layer. So select a blank patch like B88. Now press Tone Display and you'll notice that Tone Zone Select button 1 is active with the default Syn Rhodes 2 tone assigned to it. To select a different tone, hold down button 1 and press Tone to enter the tone bank. Now call up B42, slow string 1 by pressing bank 4, number 2. Next, turn on Tone Zone button 2 by pressing it, and you'll hear an instant layer, but not the one we wanted. Press and hold button 2 and press Tone, and select B15. Are you starting to get it? Next, turn on 3, then hold it down and press Tone. Now select A52. Press Exit. Write this patch by pressing Write, Write again, then Enter. And don't worry about the fact that there are no effects and no name. We'll cover that later.
Normally, all active tones in a patch will sound whenever you press a key on the keyboard. This is called layer mode. Patches can also be set up in split mode and zone mode. Putting a patch into split mode allows you to separate the lower tones, L1 and L2, from the upper tones, U3 and U4, at any key on the keyboard. To adjust the split point, just press and hold F2 and play a key on the keyboard. The D70 will automatically move the split point to follow whichever note you play.
Split mode is very straightforward. Just remember to arrange your tones in their proper upper and lower locations, because the lower tones will automatically be set below the split point and the upper tones will always be set above the split point.
Selecting zone mode allows you to specify an independent range or zone for each of the 4 tones in a patch. Just like setting the split point in split mode, you can set the zone for each tone quickly and easily, just by pressing down F3 until you see the zone keyboard display. And then hold down the Tone Zone Select button for the tone you want to work with. And set the range by playing the outer boundaries on the keyboard. It's easiest to set each zone by playing the lower note in that zone first. In all D70 pages, a solid line represents an active tone. A dotted line shows that a tone is muted. Also, don't forget that pressing F1, F2, or F3 instantly puts the patch into the appropriate mode, layer, split, or zone. Extensive editing capabilities are at the heart of the D70's incredible power and flexibility. We've already talked about editing layers, splits, and zones. Let's go a little deeper. The best way to get started with editing is through the D70's tone palette. Each button allows you to modify a different sound parameter. Each slider allows you to set an amount for that parameter for each of the 4 tones in a patch. You can get a look at the values by pressing the Tone Display button.
Here's a tip. If you're moving a slider but none of the values are changing, make sure that you first move the slider all the way through its current value. Just move it all the way to the top and then all the way to the bottom, and the slider will become active.
On the tone display screen, you'll see the names of the 4 tones on the left and a graphic representation of the 4 tone palette sliders on the right. Remember, solid line is on, dotted is off. Each slider shows the current value of the same parameter for each of the 4 tones. The 4 sliders and Tone Zone Select buttons correspond to the 4 tones in that order. Button 1 goes with slider 1 to affect the parameters of tone L1 and so forth. Now let's take a look at each tone palette parameter individually and see how they can be used to quickly and easily create new sounds. Level allows you to set the volume of each tone within a patch. Pan allows you to specify each tone's position in the stereo field. You might not get a panning effect listening from your TV. The tuning button has 2 functions. Key shift allows you to transpose tones up and down by half steps. Press twice for fine tune, which allows you to alter a tone's tuning in 1 cent increments. Cutoff and resonance let you alter a tone's filtering. These are very important tone palette parameters because they let you drastically change a tone's timbre. Attack and release allow you to alter the 2 most important envelope parameters for each tone. Using the tone palette buttons and sliders is one of the easiest and most powerful ways to edit a patch. It's also the safest. Let's say you've got a favorite string tone that you've used in several different patches. In one of your patches, a string and piano layer, you want the strings to have a slow attack so they fade in after the piano. At this point, if you adjust the attack time for the strings at the tone level with the TVA parameters, you'll be altering that string tone in every patch that it's used in. But if you use the tone palette to alter the attack time at the patch level, you'll only change the envelope in that patch. In other words, each patch has its own set of tone palette parameters that simply act as offsets to settings in the actual tone edit pages. This is a very important point to consider when you start editing sounds, because there's no way to know if a tone has been used in more than one patch.
Don't let the simplicity of the tone palette and the quick access screens fool you. Sometimes the simplest edits can be the most effective. Here's a very simple edit you can make to the D70's grand piano patch.
Start by calling up the sound D piano plus 1. Its performance, bank 1, number 1. Hit tone display and you'll see that we're going to alter the grand piano switch patch. First change the range by pressing tuning for key shift. Now adjust sliders 1 and 2 until the corresponding numbers at the top of the display read 0. You'll also notice that playing softly triggers a darker, mellower sample, and that playing harder triggers a brighter sample. Some people find that the transition between the 2 samples isn't very smooth. To fix that, press the tone display button again. You'll see that the velocity mode is set to SW for velocity switch. That's why there's no transition between the soft and hard samples. At a certain velocity level set by the threshold parameter, 92 in this case, the D70 automatically switches over to the hard sample. To get a smooth transition between the 2 samples, set the velocity mode to mix by pressing the increment button. The sound becomes instantly more playable and realistic because you now gradually mix in the brighter sample as you play harder. To start exploring more about velocity switches and mixes, check out page 54 in your owner's manual.